This is Sadanand Dhume, resident fellow of American Enterprise Institute, to discuss with him the Pakistan problematic. Sadanand, welcome.
Good to be here.
Pakistan has had this Lahore attack just a few days back, and it's so serious that the Prime Minister there had to cancel his visit to Washington, D.C. to participate in the Nuclear Security Summit. What is the D.C. view of the things that are happening in Pakistan?
I mean, first and foremost, of course, people's hearts go out for that horrible tragedy in Pakistan, the large loss of life, including a very large number of children. As you know, that attack took place in a park. So that's the most immediate response of people, not only in Washington, but I would say around the world. But beyond that, it does raise very serious questions about Pakistan and the trajectory on which Pakistan is. As you know, this was an attack right in the heartland of the Prime Minister's own base, in the heartland of Punjab, a place which has seen terrorist attacks before, but is generally seen as quieter and safer than, say, a place like North Waziristan. So it raises questions about the stability of Pakistan, and in the context of this nuclear summit, it raises something which has been at the top of the world's worries, so to speak, which is how safe are Pakistan's nuclear weapons?
Okay, so the question is that if that is the picture from here, the Delhi view is, or the view of the establishment there is, that US really does not exert the kind of influence it is capable of when it comes to tackling the issue with Pakistan. What we believe, or what Delhi sees, is that the United States really gives more weightage to its self-interest vis-a-vis its presence in Afghanistan, and that's why there is an element of indulgence with Pakistan rather than, exerting, as I was mentioning, the influence that it can to really restrain the elements essentially in the Pakistan military, which can really in turn lead to better relations, for example, between India and Pakistan, or for better peace within Pakistan itself.
So I would agree with that partly, and I disagree partly. I disagree with the idea that the United States has not placed any restraints on Pakistani behavior and action. We have seen, particularly since the Mumbai 2008 attacks, that the US has leaned on Pakistan and has tried to move Pakistan in a more responsible direction. That said, I absolutely agree that the US has not done enough. The US could do much more. I think, for instance, the signal that was sent with this proposal to sell Pakistan F-16s is extremely unhelpful. And the truth is that the Pakistani establishment does remain in bed with these terrorist groups, and the US could take a stronger line where it simply says that there should be zero tolerance, as opposed to the current situation where the US shows some tolerance.
But what is the DC view like? Are there some expectations from India, specifically talking about our country, that there should be some takeaways from the summit so far as India's contribution is concerned?
I mean, I don't think that India is seen as a large part of the problem. I think one of the most successful elements of Indian diplomacy and one of the highlights of the US-India relationship over the past decade or so has been the normalization on this front. As you're aware, for the longest time, the nuclear question used to be a real thorn in the relationship and something that prevented normalization. But since the nuclear deal of 2008, even though that deal has not really led to the realization in terms of its energy potential or in terms of its trade potential from a US perspective, despite that, I think that the nuclear question in many ways is behind the US and India. And now it's really a question of how the two countries cooperate together, and it's much less oppositional than it used to be.
Okay, talking about nuclear energy specifically, about 10-11% of global energy output is coming from nuclear sources. Recently there was an auction in India where solar power was auctioned for pegged at around 5 rupees, less than 10 cents per unit. How relevant does nuclear power remain in that scenario?
See, I'm not an expert on energy, and I wouldn't be able to answer this with any great deal of depth. But I do think that your broader point is well taken, that we are at a moment in global energy markets, not only in terms of nuclear, but in terms of what's happening with the price point in solar, what's been happening with oil, what has been unleashed by new technologies such as fracking, where in many ways questions that seem to have been answered in one way, say 5 or 10 years ago, are now being looked at afresh by experts.
Pathankot terror attack happened a week after Prime Minister Modi had landed in Lahore. I mean, an impromptu initiative in terms of furthering the dialogue. And then subsequently, whatever has happened in terms of a spy getting caught and the Pakistan JIT coming and demanding certain things which even in normal times cannot be shared. You think that where this thing will lead to, in terms of the policy direction that Pakistan is taking, how does it help or does not help?
I certainly think it's been quite unhelpful. I think that there's an element in this relationship which is more about grandstanding, which is more about showing who is being more cooperative or being making kind of pro-peace moves. And I certainly find that the Pakistani behavior in this case has been quite unhelpful, particularly to Prime Minister Modi, who has taken a very big political risk with his own base by, first of all, dropping in to see Nawaz Sharif, and then after that by allowing this Pakistani team to visit Pathankot, and for this so-called spy revelation to emerge at exactly the same time is very embarrassing for the Prime Minister, and it does raise serious questions about whether the Pakistani military is serious about peace or is only interested in grandstanding.
Whatever the Prime Minister has done in the last 6 months vis-a-vis India-Pakistan relationship, how is it seen in the DC establishment? Is it appreciated?
Well, I won't speak for the DC establishment. I think that
The perception here.
I would say that by and large, whenever India and Pakistan are seen to be talking, seen to be reducing tensions, that is broadly welcomed in Washington. But I would not like to confuse the views of the broad consensus with my own views, where I think that the government of India has been far too soft on Pakistan.